All right. Welcome back. We are reconvening the September 15th hearing. That can't be right. We are reconvening today for the Health Committee on September 15th, 2020. I am Council Member Christopher Burnett, Chairman of the committee. We are also joined by Council Member Henry of the 4th District and Vice Chair of the committee.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Council Member Clark of the 14th District, member of the committee, and Council Member Slifer of the 5th District, member of the committee. Trying to see if I see anyone else. I don't see any of the committee members. I think we may be joined late by Council Member Reisinger. All right. Also in attendance are a host of representatives from the President's Office, Mayor's Office, and city agencies. Before we start, we are asking that all speakers and panelists to mute yourselves when you are not speaking. Identify yourself before you speak. Speak slowly and clearly, and after you are finished, please remember to remute yourself afterwards so that we can have a hearing virtually, so we can hear everyone speak clearly and virtually. Today, we are holding a work session for Council Bill 20-0495, Pesticide Control and Regulation. The committee held a hearing on this bill on May 7th, 2020, where we received testimony from several agency representatives and stakeholders. At that time, several proposed amendments were discussed, and the hearing was eventually called to recess to give us more time to work on the amendments in the bill. All of the committee members should have received the amendments. But at this time, I'd like to turn the hearing over to Councilmember Clark, the primary sponsor of the legislation, to give us an update on the progress made thus far in the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Can you hear me? Thank you very much for holding this work session. I would very much like to see it go to a vote today, if possible. We are beginning to run short of council meetings as we get to the end of this term. This is a issue that was brought to me by neighborhood people, specifically in the beginning in Mayfield, that I share with Councilman Dorsey, and people being very concerned about nearby chemicals being used for lawn care that were poisonous or harmful to the health of the people around. I then entered with a lot of my colleagues and other people into an education process and came up with this legislation, which I think of as part of our environmental efforts that have been part of this council in a very big way. So this bill regulates and controls 3 chemicals. I think people are familiar enough with that fact. They are glyphosate, which is known as Roundup. They are chlorpyrifos, which is especially harmful to children and very young children, even in uterus, in terms of disabilities and learning problems. That was the bill that was approved in the General Assembly, but has been vetoed, and we looked for an override, but some of the same advocates have been working with our committee. And then finally, neonicotinoid is the 3rd chemical. And I'll be glad to talk about those chemicals if people would like to hear it, but I'd like to, if I may, just say, I'd like to quickly review what the amendments are. And we do have a new one that was added yesterday, and it's one I think is very, very appropriate, but it's number 9, so I'll mention it last. Basically, thanks to Mr. Stegman of the mayor's office, I was able to put together meetings with city agencies and with advocates on 3 different occasions to go through areas of concern and to try to develop the amendments that you see before you today, which are 9 in number. I'm not saying that those who recommended the amendments are embracing the bill, but that we are trying to meet them where their biggest concerns or requests are. So let me just briefly go through them, and you do have copies. The first there are 9 amendments. The first one is a clarification. Basically, this bill deals with the control and regulation out on the outside world, not inside buildings. And so when Recreation and Parks raised a lot of concerns about the being able to continue to use certain of these in the Rawlings Conservatory, the Silburn Arboretum, and in the Silburn greenhouses, we clarified what was always the case, that these prohibitions are for the outside world only. They don't speak to inside. So they are not covered and they can continue. The Second Amendment provides that the use of glyphosate in Recreation and Parks integrated vegetation management area would be allowed, but that Rec and Parks would have to report to the health commissioner each specific IVM area in which glyphosate use is ordered. So that's a controlled area, and using glyphosate to prevent the non-native growth that destroys other plants is done on a very careful and planful basis, and so that is the Second Amendment. To let that happen, but to be reported to the health commissioner. Third, as new harmful pesticides develop, health and sustainability, and health asks for this, will report to the city council every 2 years and recommend any such pesticides, new pesticides it considers harmful, for inclusion in this pesticide law. So it would set up a 2-year cycle for council to consider adding any harmful new pesticides. Fourth is at the request of the health department. It is the deletion of Subtitle 2 of the draft legislation. That's on pages 6 to 9 of the draft. Basically, this removes the requirement that we post in local retail stores the fact that in Baltimore City, these 3 pesticides are prohibited use. It does not limit the sale of these pesticides in Baltimore City. But in any event, that is part of what has been taken out of the bill at the request of the health department. And it also, in some small way, diminishes I believe, their staffing needs for inspections. The fifth is, that's mine. Because we're in the midst of COVID-19, and next year is going to be, we pray, a year of very difficult financial times, and hopefully of eventually coming to the new normal life we all look forward to. So I moved the effective date to July 1, 2022, so that we would get through the next year before this would come into play in Baltimore City. Just a couple more to go. 6 provides housing with an exception to comply with the rodenticide procedure that's in the city building, fire, and related codes article. In other words, it makes them an exception. They can continue with their rodenticides, for example, when they're demolishing buildings. Excuse me. 7 clarifies that the Baltimore City Public Schools are preempted. They are already covered by the state pesticide law. The interior and exterior of all our public schools are covered by that act, the Maryland Act, that already affects the schools. So we note that they are exempt at their request. The 8th Amendment clarifies, is from the Law Department, and it clarifies the definition of the use of the word lawn and the definition of playing field. And finally, and this is my colleague from the 5th District, he is concerned that private owners may not be aware of the law, even though we have built in an outreach process that will precede the enactment, in which the Sustainability Commission will help to educate the public about the law. However, there's an amendment now that says that you cannot issue a citation until you have first, on the first occasion, issued a written warning that you can't use such and such a chemical, so that people don't get a $250 fine and not even know yet about the law. So I thought that was a good idea, and that has been written up and is part of the official amendments. I would ask my colleagues, I'd be glad to try to answer questions and hope to hear from agencies that wish to be heard, but I would ask my colleagues to consider supporting this legislation and moving it forward today. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
I'm trying to figure out the best way to handle this. Let's start with questions from the committee on any of the amendments presented. Seeing none, I know there's been a lot of conversation about this.
Yeah, we've talked a lot.
Okay. So if there's no questions, is there feedback from any of the agency representatives or further clarification on anything that's been presented?
This is Hillary from the Law Department. I just wanted to let everyone know the Law Department approves all these amendments in addition to the 9th one that was just mentioned.
Oh, thank you, Hillary. I forgot to, yeah, thank you.
That's okay. It'd be
Yeah,
fine.
came in late.
Thank you, Hillary. And I saw Mara from Finance. Yeah.
Hi, yes, Mara James from BDMR. We also have Bob Sudme, the director of the budget, on the call. Finance was able to work with Rec and Parks to come up with a cost estimate for this, and we sent a memo that the sponsor reviewed, and I wanted to give her an update that we have updated those numbers. And I wanted to share those numbers with the committee, if that's okay. So based on discussions with Rec and Parks, we believe that switching to mechanical treatment for weeds rather than spraying will have a cost of approximately $321,600 for personnel hours. The current costs using spraying are about $80,400. So that's, I can't do the math very quickly, but that's a couple $100,000 more. The additional costs, just to note, we came up with an estimate that included about $70,000 for public outreach. That is based on talking with the Office of Sustainability for a previous bill that was similar for the comprehensive fat reduction legislation. Based on Amendment 9, we might need to adjust that estimate if there would be increased outreach requirements. And then the only other addition to note is that we estimated for health for the enforcement costs having one inspector and one supervisor, which would be new positions. That would be $160,000. So first year implementation would be for a total of approximately $551,600. And that's having outreach only in that first year of that 70,000. Ongoing, it would be $481,600 for years following. And I am updating the memo that we sent previously with these numbers that I can send to the committee to make sure that they have this, and then it can go on Legistar. But I'm happy to answer any questions.
Okay, any questions?
Can I ask a question?
Councilmember Clark?
Yeah, I apologize. But was there a reason why existing positions could not take on responsibility?
For health, is that what you're asking specifically?
Yeah.
Based on our discussions with health, and I can defer to Paul here, but we know that they already have some staffing issues with inspectors. Additionally, having this based in health, the idea of a program manager that would be working on it. There isn't currently a position that I know of that would be able to take that on. They already have quite a few other tasks they're taking on. But DePaul, I don't know if you want to speak to that in more detail.
Yeah, I would mostly echo your sentiments. Right now, our health inspectors are not trained in this particular matter. We'd essentially be building out the program from scratch, much like Montgomery County did. But in addition to that, I'll just note that our health inspectors mostly have their hands full with restaurant inspections. And as it stands right now, we are still missing our state quotas for said inspections, and we also anticipate some attrition within our health inspector ranks. So it's always a difficult proposition to kind of have the environmental health inspection team take on additional duties by virtue of the churn that we often see with inspectors, and then also what they're specifically trained to do.
Is of this going to be like call driven through 311?
Can I answer yes? That's how it is. And let me just say that I totally agree with the health department that it would originally the estimate was 2 new inspectors just dedicated, but once the this subsection 2 was eliminated at the request of the health department, a number of the tasks of inspection were eliminated. So I think I heard the finance say 1 inspector, and I think it's warranted. And we also need a director of the program, because this is going to be, there'll be questions, there'll be, there should be someone who is knowledgeable. And this is really the beginning of something that will probably grow in terms of public awareness and interest. And it's just plain good for the health of the people who live here. The other thing is, we did address all the major issues that were introduced in the 4-page agency letter by Rec and Parks. They talked a lot about those inside buildings I mentioned before, which are exempt. And we also were concerned. We felt that the IVM plan was organized and systematic and professional to the extent that it was controllable by Rec and Parks and just reported to the health commissioner because of the invasives. And still with all that, I expected the need for hourly labor increases to be less than finance and Rec and Parks are estimating. And I still do think that costs, which are the main costs in the total financial estimate, are for hiring laborers to do weed whacking and weed removal at Rec and Parks. And frankly, the wooded areas are covered now through this IVM plan. So we're talking about sidewalks in public areas, and frankly, I don't want to see these chemicals there. And I think it is worth what has to be done. And I would note that DOT and DPW, and if they're here, they can contradict me if I speak wrong, but they have indicated they have both agencies given up the use of these 3 chemicals as a matter of policy. And at the time that we had our initial hearing, indicated that they didn't need extra money to handle that. So I think there's a way to probably, in some extent, work out these estimates and find out that in practicality, they're maxed. They're maxed.
Can I get back to the root of my question? And to Paul, how many inspections does an average inspector do a year?
It's very difficult for me to extrapolate what that number is right now.
How many inspections does your agency do in total a year?
I mean, we try to hit every restaurant within a span of 3 years. It's tough for me to say exactly what that number is, but I'm happy to get back to you with it.
Is there a way you can get it during this hearing, just how many total inspections you guys do?
Sure. Yeah. Let me talk to our staff and get you that number.
Okay. And then I want to come back to that when you do have that, because I'm just not sure how, with calls being generated by 311, how there will be even a close amount of folks who are needed, based on inspections being done. And I think, having people cross-trained would probably, make more sense so that other inspectors can also do these inspections.
May I say one thing, Councilman Schleifer, about that? Am I on? Whoa.
You're on. You're muted. Go ahead.
Oh, okay. Can you?
We could hear you.
Oh, okay. The health department, I don't know if they support this or not at this point, but they definitely wanted, if it happened, they wanted a new inspector added to the list of whatever their regular number is, wanted a new one. And I just have to say that because they didn't want to put more burden on existing ones that are already doing different health inspections. I just say that on their behalf. I know it's part of a fiscal note, but really, and the money that's part of the fiscal note for the outreach is really based, I believe, on what a grant that sustainability received when I think it was doing outreach on plastic bags. That was a grant. And it's not to say that it couldn't be again by the time 2022 rolls around.
Councilwoman, I'm on the same page with you. My only concern
No, I understand.
was that, the inspector the inspector and the supervisor making this their sole responsibility. And frankly, I just don't see the call volume being anywhere near enough where there's a need for a full person and a supervisor. I'm not opposed to both of those positions being created as long as they're also doing other functions. What I would not want to see is a program created and spend hundreds of thousands of dollars, and then we find that there's only 100 inspections, 150
Right.
inspections a year, and that this team of two people can do that over the course of 1 week for the year, and then just sit back and relax the other 51 weeks of the year.
You know what? You're right, and this would definitely come under the health department's environmental division, and basically, I think you're right. I think that person, the one inspector and the director, and could be doing other responsibilities within that whole environmental section as well. Just so health did not want this initiative to impact on a limited number of inspectors that they have now, and ask them about hours. But maybe I should have.
Paul, can you confirm that these folks would be given other responsibilities as well?
Mr. Chair, point of order.
Go for it.
Yeah, I appreciate what our colleague is trying to accomplish in terms of making certain that the health department is running as effectively and efficiently as possible. But this legislation before us is just about the regulation of the pesticides themselves. How the health department enforces it is technically another conversation and not one that's going to be part of the body of the bill. So I'm just asking, can we separate these conversations? Because I would rather not extend the length of this conversation to have that one. I'd rather finish this work, and if we need to have an investigative or an informational hearing later on with the health department about how they're going to be handling the inspections that this bill is going to require, that's great. But the number of inspectors hired and how they're supervised and what they're cross-trained to do is technically not part of the legislation before us.
So that must be my mistake. Then I thought that in the legislation it had a requirement to hire these folks. Is that not the case?
Yeah. So hold on, everyone.
It's not in the bill. Sorry.
So yeah, I mean, I think it is implementation. I think is to sort of fit into this conversation. Yeah, I think it is.
I'm sorry, Mr. I'm sorry,
but
yeah,
I also
Mr.
know
Chair,
that,
if there is a part of this that specifically requires hiring new employees and how they're supervised, then that probably should be in the title and purpose clause. Because that's what I was working off of on the short term, because I didn't remember that from reading through it.
So one second, everyone. So one, I think I'm gonna have to step away for a second. So I'm gonna hand it to Councilmember Vice Chair Henry. 1 second. But I would note that I do think it is helpful for the conversation. But Councilmember Henry, are you able to take over for 1 second for me?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Councilwoman Clark, you had tried to answer.
I'm where it's the budget. It was the budget report, the finance department report that got into numbers and hours and costs. It's not in the legislation. What's in the legislation is that the health department is in charge of the program. And that is there. But that leads to budget issues. But they're not in the bill. They're just in the fiscal report to the council. And actually, there's nothing about whether they are dedicated or not. But I know that health wanted a new position so that it didn't use up any time of existing positions for inspection.
Okay, so
It's
if I
a
can,
valid question to ask, the inspections get done by who a year, but that all just kind of came in. That was read, if read.
gotcha. Okay, so Ms. James, were the additional costs that the Budget Bureau was projecting additional costs from hiring additional staff people? And if so, how many staff people were you projecting hiring?
Yes, these were additional costs. All of our costs were based around in how to implement this legislation.
So how many more people were you predicting hiring?
We were predicting for the health department hiring 1 inspector and 1 supervisor who would be a program manager that would then oversee the program for health.
Okay, and I'm sorry if I'm extending this unnecessarily, but managing the program, again, looking at this legislation, this legislation is saying you can't use these pesticides. So what is the program that you're projecting would need to be managed?
So there are multiple exemptions that are allowed that the health department needs to be notified of, that the health department, I believe, needs to review. And so it would be managing those aspects, as well as I'm trying to find this as well as reviewing the emergency applications that are allowed. And DePaul, I don't know if you can speak more to it. I'm trying to find the specific.
There's also the amendment wherein we would be charged with determining additional pesticides that may or may not need to be going forward. The fact of the matter is that our inspectors go through a certification process, and all that education is included in that process, and pesticides are not a part of it.
And I'm sorry, and how many inspectors do you already have?
I believe we have 12 right now, but that could be more or less. I don't know, because COVID has affected our operations quite a bit.
I'm sorry, and you have right now you have 12 inspectors, and How many supervisors or program managers?
I would have to get back to you. I know of at least 2. But according to the head of our environmental health unit, it's about 5,000 inspections that we're doing amongst those inspectors per year. That's a rough estimate.
And going back to Ms. James, what was the delta that that budget was projecting? It was going from
For health enforcement. So we were going from 0 to 160,000.
Oh, 160,000. I'm sorry. I thought. Oh, and was there another?
There are additional
expense?
costs, yes, for rec and parks, and then for the outreach.
Right. Okay.
So the outreach is mandated in
Right.
the bill.
That's right. And the rec and parks was the difference for the mechanical.
Yes, and if I can just clarify one thing that Councilmember Clark said, the $70,000 that we were projecting is not based on a grant. That's the similar amount that we've put in from the general fund this year for the comprehensive bag reduction program. So that's where that came from, not from a grant, a general fund contribution.
Okay. And Mr. Nibbler, were you able to find out how many inspections health currently performs on an annual basis?
Yeah, that number is 5,000. But one thing I also wanted to add is that the other reason that we believe that a supervisor position is warranted is, as I mentioned, there is an education component that is included when our inspectors get certified. But having to build up the base of knowledge with respect to pesticides and consistently informing our inspectors of what to look out for, how to go about the process is going to require a build out. And so a supervisor that is knowledgeable of these needs is going to need to be there and kind of overseeing the entire process.
Okay. Councilman Schleifer?
Yes.
So it was that information from Mr. Nibber sufficient to your purposes?
I missed that. What exactly did he just say? On the numbers, you said there was 12 inspectors.
And they do 5,000 inspections a year, or approximately 417 each when averaged out.
Right.
Yeah. And
okay, but that definitely furthers my point that I don't think there's there's any chance that there's going to be 416 or anywhere near that worth of complaints on this type of thing. So I would just say, and if it's not in the bill, that's fine, and I appreciate that. But I just think that you could wrap this into having a few of those 12 folks also trained in this to be doing those inspections when they do come up. Or if you need to hire another person, that person be cross-trained. That's all.
I think that's a great point, Councilman. Thank you. If there are any other questions from members of the committee, hearing none, I would like to know if there are any anybody who'd like to make a motion on the amendments.
May I?
You may.
I'd like to move the amendments, all 9 of them.
Excuse me, did you want me to have Councilman Burnett come in for the vote?
I thought Councilman Burnett, is Councilman Burnett here?
He's here, but he's not in the room right now.
Oh, okay.
Oh, yeah.
Well, yeah, if he's available, yeah, sure.
Sure.
Okay, let me check. I may be wrong. Can you give me 1 minute?
Sure. We will recess until we know whether or not Councilman Burnett can join us for the vote. So this hearing is in recess.
I'll be back within 3 minutes. Thank you.
I have a question. Can someone send me the amendments via email?
You don't have? No, I can't do it right now because I'm on.
I can forward you, Liam. I just don't have amendment number 9.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I have. Let me tell you. While she's doing that, I'll tell you what 9 is.
Okay.
It is proposed by Councilman Schleifer, And it basically says, here's what it says. You're out there, you don't know this law. You're using one of these chemicals, pesticides, but you didn't know it was against the law. They can't write any citations. They have to first, if they find somebody doing that or have a complaint, give them a written warning not to do that. So basically, it's only if they do it again that they would get fined. That's the 9th one. Were you here when I was talking about the short version of all these amendments? When I went through them in the beginning?
Was here.
You were here? I don't know what he's doing.
Thank you, Mara. I just got your email.
Hello, everyone. Stephanie Murdock, Legislative Liaison for Housing. I figure while we're waiting, I just jump in. We appreciate the Councilwoman's efforts to accommodate our amendment, and we stand by our bill report of no objection. Thank you.
Thank you. Looks like the chair's back.
Sorry about that. Okay. So I understand we have ready to move the package of amendments. Is there a motion? We're going to move them all of them at once. Is that the preference?
All 9.
Yep. Okay.
She said 9.
What? 9.
So I think we have 8 on our list. Was there?
Oh my gosh! I sent.
There was a 9th one on the list that was mailed out earlier.
I got it.
There,
Okay.
it would, yeah. It's a Councilman Schleifer's. It's a hold harmless. It says you're a private owner. You use one of these prohibited pesticides. You didn't even know, so you get a written warning before, and then the next time you do it, you start getting fined. I forget the language. It's on the. It's on.
I can read it. It says that on page 13, after line 14, insert D, written warning required. A citation under this section may only be issued after the issuance of a written warning.
Okay.
Yeah. I second the motion.
Okay. The motion was made by.
In a minute.
Seconded by Councilmember Henry. All right, I am a yes. Councilmember Henry?
Yes.
Councilmember Clark?
Yes.
Councilmember Reisinger is absent. Councilmember Slifer?
Yes.
Okay. 4 votes in the affirmative, 1 absent. The amendment passes. Is there a motion to move the bill as?
So moved.
Second.
All right. Moved by Clark, seconded by Henry. Burnett is a yes. Councilmember Henry?
Yes.
Councilmember Clark?
Yes.
Councilmember Reisinger is absent. Councilmember Slifer?
Yes.
All right, the motion is passed. Favorable with amendments. The bill will be placed on second reader on Monday, September 24th, 2021. The full council will review and take a vote at that time. If there's other business, the committee adjourns. Thank you all.
Thank you so much, everybody. Thank you, Mr. Chair.